everybody. This is just a really short video where I'm going to walk you through some of the basic ideas behind the trolley problem. The reason why it's so short is that I've posted 3 links on the Moodle page that will further explain the trolley problem and get into some explanations of the variations. So you don't really need me to explain a lot to you. I'm hoping my dog here doesn't bark too much at us during this video. So let's just walk through a little bit of the trolley problem. So the classic trolley problem is laid out like this image where you have a trolley or a train kind of barreling down the track. And if it keeps going as it is, it's going to run into 5 people. And you want to save those 5 people. And it's going to end their lives, right? So the alternative is if you pull this lever here, you can divert the trolley and it won't run over those 5 people. However, it will end the life of 1 person on this alternate track. So this is the classic trolley problem that was put forth by philosopher Philip Foot. And it's just meant to get people thinking about what is permissible and not permissible to do in order to save lives. It's usually put forth as an example of utilitarianism, the idea that it might be allowable or even required or good to divert the trolley so that only 1 person's life is ended instead of 5. So we saw some examples of this already, of this type of reasoning and measuring out 1 life versus many when we were looking at utilitarianism. So what's interesting to note is that most people, when posed with this problem, would say, yes, of course, you are allowed to pull the lever and divert the trolley so that it ends the life of only 1 person instead of 5. The problem there, or the thing that we need to keep in mind, is that most people do not say that you're morally required to do it. They just say that this act is morally permissible. So that means you're allowed to do it. You wouldn't be a bad person if you did that, but it's also okay to let the trolley continue along its way if you chose to do that. So this seems very similar to another issue that we've already talked about on the discussion boards this semester, which is the issue of organ transplant. So this is a sort of a parallel issue in which you would end the life of 1 person deliberately in order to save the life of 5 others, right? So we have a person who's very healthy, who is not ailing in any way, but who happens to be a perfect match for 5 people who need transplants, 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, a liver, and a heart. So interestingly, though, the same people, most people who say that it would be permissible to sacrifice the 1 person in the trolley example say that it is not allowable to sacrifice 1 person in the organ transplant example. So this requires us to think a little bit about what the difference is between these 2 things. Is it just a matter of the type of act that you would have to perform in order to save 5 lives and end 1 in 1 instance versus another? Or is there something different going on? So this is something that I want you all to consider, whether you think there's an important moral difference between the classic trolley example of pulling the lever to save 1 life versus 5, and this organ transplant example where we're also performing action to end 1 life but save 5. So I noticed on the discussion board, most people said that it wouldn't be allowable to do this, whereas in the trolley example, most people surveyed, I don't know what you all personally think, but most people surveyed would say you are allowed to sacrifice 1 person to save 5 in the trolley example. Another variation of this is the example of the fat man, and this is something that is described in some of the videos that I posted as well. So let's say instead of pulling a lever, you can stop the trolley by pushing a very large man in front of it, and his body weight is enough, his mass is enough that he would actually stop the trolley. However, by doing that, you would end that person's life. So again, you're on a footbridge overlooking the track. If you push him over, he'll stop the trolley. Same thing, you're sacrificing 1 person's life to save 5. In this instance, most people would not be okay with pushing the fat man in front of the trolley in order to save those 5 people. So again, we need to think about if we've got the same calculation going on, right? 1 versus 5, what's the difference? Why are we not as willing to do this, not as willing to say this is morally permissible compared to pulling the lever? There are a lot of things that could be going on there. One is the directness of your action. You have to actually touch and push the large man over in front of the trolley, whereas in the other instance, you're more removed. You're just pulling a lever. We have to think about whether those morally significant differences or just differences that make us feel better about it. And then finally, the text also wants us to think about sacrificing ourselves versus sacrificing another person. So one of the things that Thompson wants us to think about is let's imagine that there's a lever, and if you pull it, it'll do one of two things. In one instance, if you pull it one way, it will go around and kill the one person on the other track. But let's say you pull it the other way, and it'll divert the trolley so it goes around and kills you and saves the 5 people. What we need to think about is if you wouldn't sacrifice yourself, if you're willing to pull the lever to kill one person to save 5, but you don't want to be that one person, maybe we shouldn't be willing to sacrifice another person either. So the idea here is that you can't force other people to pay the cost of your supposed morally good act. So just to get into that a little bit more, the idea there is that you would have to be willing to die yourself in order to make it okay to force another person to pay that price. And the example that's given in the text is if you think it's good to donate to famine relief, but you don't want to give your own money, you're not allowed to take someone else's money and give it. That would be another example of forcing another person to pay the price for you trying to fulfill your own moral obligations. That's another thing that we need to think about, whether it is okay to sacrifice the life of someone else if we wouldn't be willing to make that sacrifice ourselves, if our life isn't the one that we would be willing to sacrifice to save those 5 people. So that's all I have on the trolley problem. Again, you need to watch the videos that present some explanations and variations of it. And I just want you to think a little bit about what you think the important moral distinctions are between these different scenarios, what you think of the idea of the initial scenario of sacrificing one to save 5, whether you agree with that assessment that that is permissible, and what you think the distinctions are between that initial presentation and other variations that come along later.